could be a minor fender bender or a major injury incident. So it's important for us to know beforehand in advance what to do to avoid some costly mistakes. So today we are very honored to have very recognized lawyers with decades of experience in this area to share with us the expertise. And as I could tell from the names, I recognize a few names I have known for many years, but for sure there are probably a few who are new to our association or seminar. So before getting started, I would love to invite the president of CAST USA, Ms. Zheng Ning, found to have a brief introduction of our association. And then let's welcome our president. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, welcome everybody. And let me give everybody a brief introduction of CAST USA, and then we can get to the real deal start today. All right. So 中国旅美科技协会, in English it's Chinese Association for Science and Technology USA. It's a non-political, non-profit and non-religion. It's a pure community services oriented and focused voluntary society. It was registered in New York City in 1992. So that makes this year a 30 years big milestone. Tonight, this particular seminar will be part of the celebration series. The primary missions of CAST USA is to promote scientific, technological, educational, and commercial exchange and collaboration between China and the US and anywhere that we have business with, or we have financial transactions to deal with as well. So it was for just the two regions, and it has gone much more beyond over the years. And also one of the missions is to promote traditional Asian, especially Chinese culture, and mutual understanding amongst the people and the professionals across the two countries. So over the past 30 years, we have approximately 10,000 professionals join this organization, and they are primarily in the fields of science, technology, culture, education, law, finance, like myself, and humanity, and so on and so forth. It's very broad and multi-area of expertise in this particular congregation. So it's very unique and very wealth of knowledge base. We have established from beginning New York chapter, then grew into approximately 20 chapters in the United States, in different states. As you can see, if you want to flip to slide 3, there is a map. Hello, if Sarah, you're still sharing?
Yes.
Yeah, it's coming. Okay, great. All right. If you flip to slide 3.
Here, yes.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, great. Yes, you can see all the stars represents the chapters that we have presences, offices in. This is just the map about this side of the ocean. And across the ocean in China, we have approximately between liaison offices and chapters and offices, literal offices, about 15-ish of them in China. So between the two regions, I think this particular group has made a huge impact, positive impact from all around scientific, technological innovation, cultural influences in this country. It has added very significant value to the society, and especially to the local community where we live in, each one of us living. I think that's a great organization to join and to be part of that. And if anyone interested, we have the tab under on the footer of the slide. You can see cast-pa.org/seminars that you can follow along. And then we host different seminars on different topic, bi-monthly, sometimes even monthly. And the middle link, web partners page, you can check out who is our strategic partners and the sponsors, and they offer a very attractive deal to our members, just as a gesture to show their love to the community service as well. And I think we're very proud that Josh represent Goodrich and Guest Company. It's a law firm, and they are a very, very proud sponsor for our Chinese show this year. And they are my friends for years, and I'm a very happy customer. Just a very blessing to find the lawyer that you work with very well and you can trust, and they are definitely one of them. All right, so Sarah, I just turned it over to you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Fan Ling. As Fan Ling Zheng has mentioned, you could see we have a lot of chapters. So wherever you are welcome to join us or reach out to your local chapters, or just email us. So now, without further ado, I'd love to give the floor to Joshua, who has 3 decades of experience in this area and who has been recognized as the top lawyers, super lawyers, and top 50 lawyers in this area. So, Joshua, I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, let me get my screen up. Thank you, Sarah and Fan Ling. It's my pleasure to be here. I appreciate you having me and inviting me. And all right. Let's see. We're a little far along, but I'll go backwards and get us to the right spot. All right. So my day-to-day work is representing people who are victims in many different tragedies and accidents, but a large majority of those accidents are a motor vehicle accident, whether it's a bicycle, a car, a truck, a bus, any way we travel our roads here in Western Pennsylvania is a situation where I might be involved. The topic of my talk is don't become a coverage tragedy. So what is a coverage tragedy? A coverage tragedy is when the damages or the harm that someone suffers is larger than any available insurance. And unfortunately, a coverage tragedy is something we see on a regular basis in our office, where someone suffers significant injuries or even death, and the economic damages, so the lost income or earnings, as well as the medical expenses, both in the past and in the future, and also the non-economic harms, what the injuries do to the individuals and their families. When we put all of those together, they're more than the person who caused the harm's insurance that's available. So for example, let's say that those damages are $1 million, and that can happen quickly and commonly. But the person who caused the accident only has $100,000 in insurance coverage. And that is the only source of recovery for the injured person or family. That is a coverage tragedy. So what I'd like to talk to you about today is something that I don't often get to talk to my clients about, because usually by the time they get to me, they've already purchased their own personal auto insurance. And I didn't get a chance to talk to them beforehand, like I'm getting with you tonight. Automobile insurance in Pennsylvania is very unique. To each state has its own required coverages and certain limits. So I want to talk to you a little bit about those coverages and also what those limits are, at least at a minimum, and what I would recommend if I were buying auto insurance, and if I would tell my family members, my clients, anyone that has a willingness to listen to me, what coverages you should have on your policy so you can prevent becoming a coverage tragedy. So this is a headline from the Post-Gazette just recently, that despite the fact that we've been in quarantine and lockdown for 2 years now, driving deaths have actually increased during the pandemic. There's a lot of reasons for that. But clearly, even when we're not doing our normal day-to-day routines, the risk is out there every time we get on the roadway. So let's talk a little bit about the types of insurance coverage that you will, number one, be required to buy, but also have the opportunity to also purchase and add to your insurance coverage. First of all is liability coverage. All that means is when you are at fault and cause damage. So if you're the one who causes a car crash, your liability coverage will come into play and protect you and hopefully pay the harm and damage that you may cause, unfortunately. And hopefully you never have to do that, but it does happen. There are two different types of liability coverage. The first is bodily injury liability. And what that means is you cause injury to someone's body. So there's a compensation for that within our law, and that coverage would provide for those injuries. And then there is property damage liability. So that can be the most obvious, which would be damage to a vehicle. If you cause a accident and damage someone else's property, their vehicle, your coverage applies and would pay for that. It could also happen where if you crash into something, for example, a telephone pole, if you crash and cause damage to that pole, your property damage liability coverage would cover that. Believe it or not, the minimum in Pennsylvania for liability coverage for bodily injury harm is $15,000. For property damage, it's $5,000. So you can imagine where you have situations with any type of injury or property damage. If you or the other driver only has minimum coverage, that could be a coverage tragedy where there's not enough insurance coverage to pay for the harm and damage that has been suffered. We want to try to avoid that. Within the, it's not necessarily liability coverage, but you'll also have an opportunity to purchase something called collision coverage. And what collision coverage just means is you cause damage to your car. So you don't hit another vehicle, you don't harm any other person's property, but for whatever reason, you slide on ice and run into a pole and cause damage to your car. If unfortunately that would happen to you and you have collision coverage, your collision coverage would protect you and pay for that damage. Similar to collision is something called comprehensive, and that means something other than another driver causes damage to your car. So, for example, a tree falls on top of your car. If you have comprehensive coverage under your policy, your comprehensive coverage would pay for the damage caused by that tree. Or if you hit a deer, that's a common one here in Western Pennsylvania. You hit a deer, if you have comprehensive insurance coverage, your insurance will pay for that damage. Pennsylvania has something, and most states have very similar coverages, something that is referenced as first party coverage. And what I like to say is when we talk first party, that means coverage for us. We're protecting us, not others. One of those that is required is medical coverage. So if you're injured in an accident, your medical coverage on your auto insurance policy will pay up to whatever limits you have. Pennsylvania is not like a lot of states. It's somewhat different. And many people get confused when I first tell them that if you're involved in a auto accident and you're not at fault, even if you're not at fault, your own auto insurance medical coverage will pay for your medical expenses first, up to whatever limit that you have. And the minimum medical coverage limit is $5,000. And if you have hopefully health insurance after your auto insurance, then your health insurance would pick up and continue to pay your medical expenses. Another first party coverage is income loss. And that's an optional coverage, something you can choose to purchase and pay for on your policy. And what that means is exactly what it says. It will pay loss of income up to whatever limits you may choose if you're involved in a motor vehicle accident and you are suffering lost income. So you're not able to go back to work. You have no way of receiving your wages. If you have income loss coverage, that coverage will pay it. Accidental death, that's another optional coverage on your policy. And that means if you or one of your relatives who lives with you is killed in an accident, even if it's potentially your fault, this coverage would pay for the death. And then lastly, funeral benefits. If you or a family member are killed in a car accident and you have funeral coverage on your policy, it'll pay funeral benefits up to whatever limits you choose. So that's first party coverage. Of those coverages, medical benefits is required, so you don't have a choice. Most people choose the minimum of $5,000 if they have health insurance, and that's perfectly fine. I personally have minimum coverage for medical on mine because I have health insurance. Income loss, I think, is important that oftentimes many people overlook. But if you're not able to work, even for a short period of time, a month or a few months, and you don't have any way of having income coming in, that income loss benefit is a good one. So I recommend that. The accidental death and funeral, that's a personal choice on what type of coverage you want to purchase and how much you can afford it. It's relatively inexpensive. Another thing that is unique to Pennsylvania is something you'll have an option when you purchase your insurance coverage to choose full tort or full right to sue, or limited tort, which is limited right to sue. And it can be confusing, but if you just take this from the seminar, always buy full tort coverage. Because if you don't have the full right to sue, you may not be able to make a recovery of all of your losses that you suffer from someone else who causes harm to you. You will pay less money for limited tort or limited right to sue. But in the event that you suffer an injury and have losses that are losses that you would normally be able to recover under the law, if you have limited tort coverage, you may not be able to recover those. So full tort is important. The next section of coverages or area of coverage, which I think is probably the most important coverage that you can purchase in my mind and in my experience. And it's optional coverage. One is called uninsured motorist, or UM, and the other one is called underinsured motorist, or UIM. And the difference between the two, if you're involved in an accident with someone who does not have any insurance coverage, and that's about, last time I looked in Pennsylvania, they estimate somewhere between 5 and 10% of drivers on the roads don't have insurance. Either they chose not to purchase insurance, which is illegal, but they're still on our roads, or for whatever reason, they forgot to pay it and it lapsed, and they don't even realize they're driving around with no insurance. If they cause injury and harm to you, you can't recover from them because they don't have any insurance. They're uninsured. But if you have UM coverage on your policy, you're able to make a recovery against your own policy for whatever benefits that you chose. And they are sold in amounts. Commonly you see them sold as 50,000 or 100,000, and up to, you can purchase it as high as whatever your liability limits are. And the easiest way to think about it is, you can't buy coverage for yourself that's more than coverage for what you might cause to someone else. Okay, so it has to be equal to your liability limits. The more common situation that we see would involve underinsured motorist coverage. And what that means is someone causes an accident and injures you or your loved one, but they do have insurance. They just don't have enough to pay for the losses and harms. For example, they have the minimum coverage of 15,000, and your harms and losses, you could imagine pretty quickly, can be well beyond the minimum of $15,000. Hopefully in that situation, you have underinsured motorist, or UIM coverage. And in that situation, just like what you would do with your UM or uninsured case, you present a claim to your own insurance for those benefits under the policy. Okay, so UM and UIM, really important. It is the most important coverage that I see come in play when I have clients who come to me that have significant injuries or suffered serious losses because someone else caused them to them or their family, and we're trying to make up for those and recover what we can. Another important part of UIM and UM coverage is, in Pennsylvania, you're allowed to choose something called stacking. And I found this picture because that's really what you can do. You can stack your coverages on top of each other. So if you have 3 cars in your home and they're insured with underinsured or uninsured motorist coverage for 100,000 each, you can stack those 3 policies and make 300,000. So 100, 100, and 100. Now you've improved your coverage threefold. So you should always consider getting uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage and stacking benefits. Otherwise, you're paying for something that you're not going to necessarily benefit. Now, if you have one vehicle in your home, Sometimes you will still be able to purchase stacking. I encourage it. Some carriers will sell it, and it's very cheap. You'll see that your uninsured and your underinsured motorist coverage is some of the least expensive of all your coverages. All right, so where do you go to find out? Many of you, I'm sure, have auto insurance coverage, and you probably have no idea what you have on your coverages. Here's where you go. You go to what's called your declaration page. And all that is typically it's the front page of your policy. If you go online nowadays, like I do, my insurance is all online. I pay it online. I can look at my benefits online. I can change my policy online. You'll want to see what your coverages are, and that's commonly called the declaration page. It declares what coverages you have. And this is just an example. You'll see they have bodily injury coverage. That's the liability. And they have, I would consider these limits pretty small, but insurance is all about buying what you can personally afford. You can never be overinsured in my mind, but you can afford what you can afford. So always buy what you personally feel you can afford. This person has 25,000 and 50,000. That means if they cause harm to one person or more than one person, the most they'll pay is 50,000. Okay. They also have property damage coverage. Those are coverages that we talked about that are required. They chose not to have accidental death or funeral. There's the medical expenses, and they have a significant one. They have a $100,000 policy for medical expenses. Again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that if you have health insurance, because your health insurance will pick up after your auto. Collision, they actually chose that, as well as comprehensive. Here's a rental reimbursement. I don't typically talk about that, but that's usually offered and certainly is great to have if you're not able to have your car for a period of time because it's damaged and in the shop getting repaired. If you have rental coverage, then you can go and rent your car and the insurance company will pay for it. Right here is where your underinsured and uninsured coverages are. And I believe they have stacked limits. You can see stacked limits. So that's where you want to go to find out what you have. And over here in the right, like I mentioned before, in the right-hand column, there's a list. There's a fee, what it costs. And you can see your uninsured and underinsured motorist coverages, which are down here, are relatively inexpensive compared to all the other coverages. So not only is it important to have, but it's well worth the small amount that you'll pay on your policy. One thing that I can tell you, I'm happy to at any time, if someone calls my office and says, I don't know what to do, I listened to you talk in that seminar and I'm confused. You can always call my office and I can tell you, if you share with me what your declaration page is, your coverage is, what I think. I'll give you my opinion on making sure that you have the right coverages, and then you can decide on what those amounts should be and can be based on your own budget. So to wrap up in terms of your insurance coverages, you want to make sure that you have full tort, right? Because that gives you every right under the law, the full right to sue. You want to make sure that you have UM and UIM limits that are equal to your liability limits. So you're going to protect yourself as much as you're protecting someone that you might harm, and that you have those benefits stacked. Okay, so we get through insurance coverage, and we now have our insurance, and we're riding out there on the road. What do you do if you're involved in an accident? Unfortunately, it happens. First thing you should do is, of course, if someone is injured or thinks they might be injured, call 911. A lot of this is obvious, but I would feel bad if I didn't tell you the most obvious. Number two, get the other driver's information if you're able to, right? So if the police are there, obviously they will, or they should get that information. But if you're able to get the other driver's information, do that. You want to get the other driver's name, the other driver's insurance company's name, a phone number for the driver, the license plate. That's important because whatever information that person may hand you may not be accurate, but hopefully the license plate that's attached to the car they're driving is. And also the year, make, and model. Nowadays, obviously, we have phones everywhere we go. So most of my clients who come to me, the first time we sit down and talk, they have lots of photos of whatever happened. So, it's a great idea to do whatever information you're taking. Just take a picture of the other driver's license if they're willing to show it to you, their insurance card, certainly their car, certainly their driver's the license plate on the back of their car. Any other things that you think are important to the scene. For example, was it raining? Was it snowy? Well, take pictures of the scene so you can document what it looked like. Was it nighttime? Because an accident scene in the day is a whole lot different than an accident scene at night. So you want to be able to do that, and that can give you not only documenting what happened, but it also help you later on if there's a dispute about how this happened or who was at fault. Were there witnesses? Many times people will come up and say, oh my gosh, I saw that person. They ran right through the stop sign and hit you. While sometimes there are witnesses, unfortunately, a lot of times my clients, for whatever reason, they're panicked, they're not thinking, they don't get the names of the witnesses. There was a nice woman who came to the scene and said she saw everything. And it was the other guy's fault. Well, what's that other person's name? I don't know. I didn't get it. So you want to make sure you get their name, right? You want to get their contact information right then and there on the scene. Don't assume that if the police are there, they will get the witness's information. Many times the police don't do it. They're not required to do it. It's really up to the officer on how extensive they want to document the witnesses and what the witnesses might say. So if someone at the scene tells you something that you think is certainly helpful, or they may have information that might be helpful, get their name, get their contact information. Really important. If the police were involved and they actually come to the scene, which in Pennsylvania, police do not have to come to a scene if there are not reportable injuries. So if there's any type of injury, the police come to the scene. Unless you know for sure that you and everyone else involved, everybody in your vehicle and anyone else involved is absolutely not injured, then you can try to call the police. But I personally, I think you ought to call the police anytime you're involved in an accident. Even if you think, I'm a little shook up. You don't know if you're injured right then and there. Your adrenaline is moving. You don't want to be injured. You certainly don't want to go to the hospital. You want to go to wherever you were going and move on with your day. It's okay to call the police. And I recommend that you do that. It takes a lot of the work that needs to be done to get the information out of your hands and into the police. And especially if the other driver, maybe the other driver's not behaving appropriately. I've had a lot of cases where the other person says my client was not acting appropriately at the scene. They were yelling, hey, Why did you hit me? What were you looking at? It's a great idea to have the police take care of that. You don't want to have to deal with that. So if the police do come, you want to make sure you get the officer's name, their badge number, the incident number. They should have that, and they oftentimes will give it to you right there at the scene, their contact information. Many times a police officer will have a business card. Just ask for the officer's business card, or even if you can, just take a picture of it while you're at the scene. When you get home, or where you get to wherever you eventually get home, or wherever you're going, and you have an opportunity to sit down, write down what happened. It doesn't have to be every single detail, but the important details of what happened. For example, the date, the time, what the weather was like. Of course, if you have any photos, you'll want to make sure you have them all in one spot. I have many times where I've had cases where my clients say, I think I have photos, but I don't know where they are. They're in my old phone. Put them all in one spot. Keep an electronic file if you can, and make sure everything's in one spot. You will likely be asked to give at some point a recorded statement to an insurance company. And what that is exactly, typically over the phone, the insurance company will say, can we record this statement? We want to ask you about how this happened, and do we have your permission to record it? Number one, you have to give permission before they can record it. Number two, if your own insurance company asks for a recorded statement, I think it's fine to do that. You certainly don't have to, but I think it will help you with your own insurance company. If the other driver's insurance company says, we want a recorded statement, I would recommend that you don't do that for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you've already given one to your own insurance company, you don't need to give another one. Number two, maybe they're not asking the right questions. I oftentimes see the recorded statements after it's written up and transcribed, or I listen to them, and the representative for the insurance company is not asking good questions. They're not asking the full details of what happened, or they forget to ask a question that would be important. So one, it's okay to give a recorded statement, but only do it to your own insurance company. If they never ask, then you don't have to give it. Lastly, in that unfortunate event that you're involved in an accident, you should call us, Goodrich and Geist. My partner and I have combined over 60 years of experience representing people who've been in accidents. And like Fang said, we like to make sure our clients are repeat clients, or they refer clients to us. So we want to make sure we do a good job for them and that we help them. But also, I can tell you, they're like I offered early on, if you have a question about your insurance coverage, you're not in an accident, but you have a question about your insurance coverage, we're always there. You can call us, email us. We will take the time to sit with you and talk to you and answer whatever questions you might have. Even if you're involved in an accident and you didn't have an injury where you think we need to help you, we'll help you, tell you what you should do and how best to go about the unfortunate situation that you're in. All right. And I think that's all I have for you. I appreciate your time. And it's been my pleasure to speak to you this evening. I'm happy to take questions now from anyone about anything that I talked about, or about any other area of personal injury law or insurance coverage. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua, for sharing with us what to do and what not to do. So now it's the Q&A session. And if you have any question, you can just unmute yourself and then ask Joshua. I think we have enough time for that. Okay, I see Nan Yu asked, is 100K versus 300K a good number for bodily injury?
Yes, I think that's a good number. That's what I commonly see for a number of reasons. One, it's a significant amount, and it's usually in the range that most people can afford. I would just make sure that your bodily injury, like we talked about, that you have your uninsured and underinsured motorist equal to your bodily injury. So your UM and your UIM is also 100,000. Okay, so look at your declaration page and you'll be able to find that. And if it's not, then you want to increase your UM and your UIM to equal your bodily injury. Good question.
I think there was another question. The question was loss and injury and insurance pretty much the same across all states.
Yeah, another good question. A little bit different by state, but for the most part, it's very similar. Your coverages are pretty much the same. And it does change from state to state, unfortunately. So if you ask me about what is the insurance coverage in Ohio or New Jersey or Michigan, I won't know because I practice in Pennsylvania and that's all I know. But I do know that generally across the board, it's very similar. Good question.
Yeah. I have one jumping into my mind. If I drive across the border of the state to somewhere else, like New Jersey, and something happened, what kind of major differences that I should be aware of?
Yeah, good question. Your coverage will apply based on you being an insured in Pennsylvania. So it won't change if you drive to different states. The only thing that would be different, or not different, but the only thing is, while Pennsylvania has some of the lowest coverages, there are states, Florida being one of them, that has lower limits than Pennsylvania, believe it or not. Florida, with all those drivers, $10,000 is the minimum coverage for liability in Florida. Why is that important if you're driving to Florida for vacation or to visit family? Well, because hopefully you have underinsured motorist coverage on your Pennsylvania policy. Because if one of those drivers hits you and causes injury or harm, and they have the minimum in Florida, you better hope that you have more coverage on your own policy. And if you have underinsured motorist coverage equal to your liability and stacked, you protected yourself as best you can. I hope I answered that. But there's nothing unique that, oh no, now I'm in Ohio, what do I do? Nothing unique. Your coverages apply wherever you go, even Canada and I think Mexico. Why you driving to Mexico, I don't know, but maybe you do.
So we have another question from Nan Yu again. So he or she is from Utah, and she was told that police wouldn't come to the accident if the accident happens in a parking lot. Is that the case?
I don't know about Utah law, but I'll tell you about Pennsylvania law. And they probably would not if there was no reportable injuries. And what police say when they say reportable injuries, that means someone's injured and an ambulance needs to be called to the scene. They don't necessarily need to go to the hospital, but they need medical attention at the scene. So I would not be surprised if in Utah, whether it's the law or just the practice of the police in Utah, to not come to an accident in a parking lot. But, and if that's the situation, that's when you want to make sure that you do your best job of documenting what happened. I see a lot of parking lot cases, and unfortunately, a lot of times it's a pedestrian. So the police are there because that pedestrian's injured significantly. But, a lot of fender benders, small damage. That's where you want to be on the scene with your camera taking, or your phone taking pictures.
A question from Tao Tao. Hi, Tao Tao. Tao Tao was asking how auto or umbrella insurance work together and under what circumstances that the umbrella insurance could help.
Sure. Good question. I'll tell for people that don't know what umbrella is. Umbrella insurance coverage is oftentimes called excess coverage. So beyond what your first level of insurance coverage, you can purchase umbrella or excess coverage. And many times people have that on their homeowner's policy, right? So maybe you have your homeowners and your auto insurance all with the same insurance company. And you are also offered, or you choose to purchase umbrella coverage or excess coverage that would protect you in the event that someone is either injured on your property or you cause injury to them. So that would allow for liability coverage beyond whatever your first level is. And I have umbrella coverage. I think it's important to have in the event that you can. It's relatively inexpensive, believe it or not. You think that, so for example, let's say that you have a homeowner's insurance policy of $300,000, and it's usually whatever your home value is worth. Let's say it's $300,000, and you buy an umbrella policy for $1 million. You would get $300,000 in your homeowners and another $1 million on top excess. But that $1 million of coverage is so rarely used, it's relatively inexpensive. It is pennies on the dollar of what your first coverage is. I hate to get overly complicated, but let me tell you, because I think it's a really good question. A lot of people don't think about it. A lot of insurance agents don't necessarily offer it. You almost have to ask for it. But you can find insurance umbrella coverage that protects you in a motor vehicle accident. So not just for covering your home, but covering your auto. And even better, you can, if you ask and you shop and you talk to agents who are informed, you can get uninsured and underinsured coverage through your umbrella policy. So remember, uninsured and underinsured, in my opinion, are the most important coverages. And you can only get as much as your liability coverage is on your policy. So if you have 100,000 in liability and you have 100,000 in underinsured motorist coverage, but you were smart enough to buy an umbrella policy of $1 million in coverage, you now get $1.1 million in coverage for a relatively inexpensive cost. So if you can get it and you are, able to buy it, I recommend it. I have it. I mean, I have it because I see it. I try to get as much as I can afford because I know how important it is.
Any other questions? Or you can just unmute yourself and then ask directly or type in the chat box. Hey, Michael, do you have a quick? Oh, okay. Oh, wait, Michael, if you have any question, you can just ask Joshua. We have enough time for today.
Sorry, can you guys hear me?
I thought you have a question.
Yeah, but you know the point. I mean, there's not seems we do not have too many questions, so let me just trying to utilize the time. I mean, could Josh? I mean, first I logged in earlier. I think that Josh, you seem to be a very humorous person. So, you know, I mean, I guess your spare time, you might want to. I don't know. You want to look into become like stand up. But
I don't know. I think I'd bomb. I think they would be throwing the vegetables and fruit at me.
you know, after certain years, you might want to change, right?
That's
I mean,
right.
people want to change. Beyond that, I guess since you seem to be on your website, you seem to be you and your partner seems to be doing a lot of cover a lot of areas of personal injury laws. So beyond the auto incident, what's the difference? And could you give us a little bit flavor of different type of personal injury? How is showing up in Pennsylvania laws?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'll tell you a little bit about my practice and what I do. A large percentage of my practice involves motor vehicle crashes, car accidents, trucking accidents. Another area of law that I practice is medical malpractice. So when people are injured by medical providers, I represent them. Property damage claims or falls on someone's property, either a fall or someone is injured on someone else's property, whether it's a business, a home. We represent people in those situations. I do some civil rights work. So people are guaranteed certain rights under our Constitution. And if those rights are violated or infringed, there are certain laws that allow us to bring a claim against usually the government for doing those violations. I'll tell you the most, believe it or not, the most common claim on a personal homeowner's policy is a dog bite. It's not only the number one claim, it's also the highest paid claim under homeowners policies. So I love dogs. I have 2 of them. They're great. Unfortunately, sometimes they cause harm and permanent damage and injury. So I've certainly had those cases. But Michael was right. Our practice is pretty diverse. We have a lot of different areas within personal injury. And a lot of times people ask me, well, tell me about the cases you handle. And usually I say, my practice involves representing people who've suffered injury or death caused by somebody else's carelessness. They weren't doing what they should have done, and they caused injury or death to my client. So you can imagine, and that's why there's so many different ways, unfortunately, in our world today to be a victim of someone else's stupidity or carelessness. And that's where I come in and hopefully help the family get back to where they can be. Unfortunately, we don't always get to get back 100%, but we try to get back as best we can. Thank you, Michael. Anybody else have questions about that or want to talk about that? I'm happy to answer. I'm not going to tell any jokes, even though Michael wants me to. I'm not going to tell any jokes.
you can use us to practice. But I think a related question would be when you go these days, when you go out to do any activities or participate anything organized by relatively size organization, you essentially sign off all your rights. They ask you to do a legal C type of I don't know, what do you call it? Type of term of conditions. I mean, how do you deal with that against, or how if I need to go to activity, they ask me to sign off every single rights and
Yeah. That's a great question. I didn't understand you at first, but now I know exactly what you're asking. You're asking when you go, let's say, well, I'll tell you, I just did this with my kids. We go whitewater rafting, right? And you want to do something or go to one of those trampoline parks, right? They ask you to sign a waive all of your rights. Is that what you're asking, Michael?
That's exactly what I was asking.
Okay.
But
yeah, it's a great question. And you would think that someone like me, a lawyer who does this kind of work all the time, would say, I'm not signing that. Forget it. Or I'm crossing out this and that. Well, unfortunately, if you want to do the activity, you're going to have to sign it. So I have had cases where we've gotten into litigation over that waiver, that release. Pennsylvania law is pretty strict on what those releases have to include. And I can tell you that a majority of the time, they don't include everything that one would expect. So unfortunately, they have been enforced. The most common one is skiing. In fact, there's a law in Pennsylvania that pretty much protects ski resorts from any liability or fault from skiing. I've been able to get around them in rare situations, but unfortunately, if you want to do something that you enjoy that involves risk, because the company that runs it is going to want you to sign the waiver before you do the activity, you're going to have to sign it. Unfortunately, I don't have any solutions on that. I've signed too many for my kids I never wanted to do, but I have to do it. Good question, Michael.
Thank
I
you.
think
Mike.
there's another question on the chat, which is, by the way, there's no stupid question. Every single question is a good question.
Right.
Will my policy cover me when I drive my friend's car or rental car? So basically, I guess this person is asking, the policy applies to person or applies to the vehicle?
It's another good question. And Fanglin, that's a good way to phrase it. Yes and no. Okay. Your policy will cover you if you have a rental car, for sure, because every policy in Pennsylvania provides that you have coverage when you're renting a car. So basically, in that situation, your coverage, your liability coverage, follows the person, right? Not the car. If you're driving your friend's car, your coverages will cover some of your claims, but not necessarily all. So for example, if you're driving your friend's car and you're involved in an accident and you need medical coverage, your own policy will pay for your medical coverage. If you're driving your friend's car and someone else is at fault and causes injury to you, and they don't have enough liability coverage to pay for your damages, your own uninsured or underinsured policy will cover you. Where it gets dependent upon the policy and what the language is a situation where you're driving your friend's car you cause damage to either property or another person, your own policy liability coverage may not apply. It may, but it also may not. It depends on how the language within the policy reads. I would say a majority of the time it will not cover you for liability purposes, because in that situation, it doesn't follow the person, it follows the car. Okay, good question. It's complicated. As you can make complicated facts and situations. That's where the law is, as you know, probably can become complicated.
So another question from the audience, which insurance pay well and is easy to work with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I hear that all the time. I'll tell you this. I'm personally, so I have my business vehicle and also my personal vehicle. And my personal vehicle, I insure with State Farm. And there's really a unique reason for that. It's not because I think they're better than anyone else. By the way, I don't think there is an insurance company that is easy to deal with or better to deal with. In my experience, not personally, but mostly through clients, what I've seen is many of the smaller companies are better because they usually have an agent involved that writes through different companies. So for example, you'll see your major insurance companies, they all have agents, but they only write through one company. But if you're an insurance agent and you write through 10 or 12 or 15 different insurance companies, you can shop that quote usually better. And also those smaller companies, usually, not always, are just easier to deal with because, you know, they're not dealing in necessarily volume. They all have lots of insureds, but your smaller mutual companies, oftentimes, I cannot endorse any insurance company because there's not one that I think is better than any other. Okay. I've had positive involvement with many and negative involvement with many. So, and usually I remember the negatives, not the positives.
Thanks.
That's definitely politically correct.
So let me see whether there are more questions I might have missed. What happens if the friend borrows my car, does not have auto insurance?
Yeah, good question. That friend would benefit from your policy. So in that situation, your policy is following the car. So you can give, assuming the person is licensed, they have to have a driver's license, but you can let your friend drive your car and they will get all the coverages that you have on your car if they're driving your car.
Okay.
So just to extend to that question, if someone is a dear friend in need, and you just give good heart, good hand, you want to lend your car to this person, but what should you do to protect yourself in this circumstance?
There's really nothing. One, know that friend that you're trying to be nice to is a safe driver. Okay. Right. Know that person's not going to be intoxicated under the influence of drugs or something when you say, yeah, go ahead and do it. So for example, the reason why I say that, I've had cases where the driver is a terrible driver and they've been known to be a terrible driver and they cause an accident. Well, I'm not only going to be able to sue the driver, I'm going to sue the friend that gave him the car. Okay. Or the most obvious one is you're at a party and your friend wants to leave and you've both been drinking and the friend wants to leave and you say, okay, go ahead. You know that person's been drinking and they're intoxicated and shouldn't be driving. Again, I can have a claim against both. So assuming you are doing a good deed and for all you know, your friend is a safe driver, that's all you really need to do.
So it sounds like the safe way to do that is just don't land your car.
That's the easiest way. You want to keep a friendship, don't cause a problem. And
yeah, just call Uber, just pay for the
right.
Uber instead.
That's right. Nowadays you got it. Here's my Uber and it'll be here in 2 minutes.
That's great. It's great. I don't see any questions in the chat, but I do want to make a recommendation. I think I had the case that Josh and Rich helped me and we won. Every single cases I had with you guys, we won, right?
Great.
I even forgot about it. Turn around, you guys won. Hey, here's your check. So I think one of the cases I remembered was the John Deere, the tractor, which everybody knows. I'm very handy. I cut my grass and mulch, and I do my edging, mulching, and mowing. And my tractor caught on fire. It was new, only less than 3 months. And they tried to brush me off many times. So I called Rich. Okay, send everything you have to me. Just get on with your life. Don't worry about it. That's it. And they took care of me. So it was wonderful. I referred a number of Chinese friends here in the community, and they were all happy customers.
Good. We're happy to do that. And I know in Pittsburgh, the Chinese community is growing, which is great. I have many clients and friends who are within the Chinese community, and we love referrals. We'll take care of you. We like to say we treat everybody like family. And I hope you can appreciate that. We try to do that every time. So you're all now part of our family, and hopefully we never want to see you as a victim, right? But if God forbid you need help, we're here. But if you have questions, we're also here. So you don't ever have to worry about making sure that you have enough coverage.
Yep.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate that endorsement.
Thank you so much, Joshua.
Have
a good night, everybody. It was my pleasure.
I think before we go, how about we take a photo? Who is sharing? Joshua, you or
yes,
Sarah?
I'm done now.
Okay.
There we go.
Now, who can take a photo for us? Who has longer arms?